Welcome to the Money Business Podcast. I'm Neal Regino.
I'm Brian Weyman.
This podcast, we're going to talk about disability and disability insurance.
DI.
It's a fun one. It's what I always start with is, what do you think your most important asset is?
Your income.
Yeah, well, you know that, but most clients are not going to say that right away.
No, they're going to say their house.
Yeah, you think about if you couldn't work tomorrow, how long would your investments and savings last you, all your assets? And, depending where somebody's at, maybe they're good. They have enough assets, they can replace their income right now, and they don't need disability insurance. But if you're just starting out or in the middle of your career, then it's the only time for me that I tell a client that you should make a payment that hopefully you'll never get a benefit from.
Yeah, because that would mean you're disabled.
Yep.
So that would be a problem.
Yep. So I don't know how you want to start this. Do you want to talk about what's the right number that you should have, how much insurance you should have, or should we talk about group versus
Well, let's talk about number one, what drives the cost of your disability insurance, meaning what is your occupation, right? Occupational class is kind of a big deal. And then the next piece would really be how much can you buy?
Yep.
Right? So obviously if somebody is in the trades and they're an electrician, their disability insurance may cost them a little bit more than that person that might have a desk job because of their occupational class. It's a higher percentage that they're going to get disabled. So it's not one thing across the board. And then the other thing you have to realize is when you're looking into disability insurance and you're trying to figure out the cost of your disability insurance, different companies favor different occupation classes different. So you gotta there has to be due diligence. You just can't go and say, I'm going to buy a disability policy from that insurance agent who works at that company because they're going to sell me that policy, and that may not be the right policy for you. So let's start with understanding.
Yeah, let's back it up real quick because I just want to, we talk a lot at, we do this for a living, so we don't think about it. Disability insurance, just to clarify, a lot of you may know this, but if you don't, if you're disabled by some definition of that policy, then the policy pays out, and it's really designed for income replacement. So if you were no longer able to, a severe injury where you can't work in any job and you had a disability policy, it's going to pay you a monthly payment, depending on what type it is, either pre-tax or after-tax, and it will pay for the duration of the term of that policy, which typically 65 to 70 years old, depending on the policy. And yeah, so I just wanted to throw that out there before we move forward, that's what it is, in case somebody tuning in does not know. So then the actual amount, the way that I determine it and the way you should think about it is what's the minimum amount that you need in order to not sacrifice your need for living from month to month.
Right. What is the minimum to get by on your living expenses?
So I've always used the term mug insurance. I heard a disability insurance person use it, and I still use it to this day. I heard it years ago, but mortgage, utilities, and groceries. So it's not something, if somebody's telling you, hey, you make $200,000, you need to make sure you have a $20,000 a month disability policy or $15,000 a month, maybe, but maybe you don't spend, maybe you only spend $60,000 a year on that salary. Right. So you want to fit it into what would you be able to still live comfortably off of if something were to happen to you, and also take into account what other investments or savings you have as well.
So there's a minimum, right? The minimum is basically, like you said, you're trying to figure out what your need is. Let's talk about the most you're legally allowed to buy.
The calculation, I believe, is 60%.
Yeah. 60% of your gross income is all they're going to allow you to buy. And the reason they do that is obvious. Well, they want you to return to work if you can. So
Yeah.
it stops people from staying on disability longer than they have to if they're getting, you know, if they're making 100% of what they made when they were working and now they're disabled, they're not going to rush back to work
Yeah.
if somebody's giving them 100%. So
Yeah, to test me there, I usually just plug it into software and it tells me, so I had to guess. And then let's talk about the difference real quick about group versus self-insurance. So, you might work at an employer that gives it to you for free. So maybe they offer 50 of what is standard with a group policy is either 50 or 60% of your income up to either $10 or $15,000 a month. So there's a cap there. Um, the first thing is the company's paying into it pre-tax. The benefit's going to come to you pre-tax, which means when you receive it, it's taxable.
right.
The second thing is the definition of disability is pretty standard. So you can't work anymore in order to receive it. And if you can, then likely they're going to get rid of the policy and make you work again, which is good. You should. But I have had a personal situation where a family member of mine had a stroke, had a group policy, received their disability policy, and the company hired a private investigator and saw that she drove herself to therapy for the stroke.
Okay.
They got rid of the policy.
Yeah.
She's still disabled to this day, and not saying that that wouldn't happen if she didn't have a group policy. I'm just telling you an experience. But they said she should be able to work. Now, she is not in a position that she could. But at any rate, so part of it is the definition of disability when it's in a group policy is pretty strict. So why don't we talk a little bit about
So what about a
self-insurance?
private policy where you buy as an individual and it's an own occupational plan,
Yep.
right? Own OC policies, as they call them. So in an own OC policy, it's not a matter of you can go do a job. It's the definition of disabled is you can no longer perform the duties of your job at your profession. So, if you were in the trades, if you were a carpenter, so to speak, and you climbed ladders all day and you had to hammer nails and cut boards, if you have some type of disability that makes you not able to do that, they can't force you to go work a cash register, and that's the difference. Whereas a non-owned occupation, like you said, you have to not be able to work at all in any fashion, or else they're going to tell you that you're not going to get paid the disability. So I prefer to see when people have own OC policies because it's a lot more simplified, it's a lot more safer, and it's not forcing them to be not only, they're already disabled from their occupation, now they're forcing them to be a career changer. So I prefer somebody to have an own OC policy or anything else.
Well, I deal a lot with the medical practitioner market, doctors, dentists, vets, nurse anesthetists, nurse practitioners, nurses. Their definition of disability has a much lower threshold. You deal with a surgeon. If they have something that happens to their hand, they can't perform their duties. They could still be a doctor. They can't necessarily do surgery. So maybe they do clinical hours, maybe they're teaching, maybe they can change it to something else, but they still actually get the benefit of that disability policy potentially. And you pay in after tax, so the benefits after tax. One big thing I'll say is the earlier you start, the better, because it's cheaper. It is based on age, the pricing. It's based on occupation as well and a number of other factors, but age is a big one. The longer you wait, the more expensive it becomes. So, I had let's talk about some of the riders outside of own occupation. So one that we talked about in a previous podcast is student loans.
Right.
A lot of these companies have student loan riders for a market that I deal with often. You've got a physician that has a huge amount of student loans. They're making good money, but they're not paid off yet, and they don't have enough assets yet to say, okay, we're okay without this. So you can have a student loan rider on a policy with a particular company that will actually pay an additional benefit that's set up for a certain amount of time until the loan's paid off. So that's one that I like, especially for
that's a good one.
new medical people. Do you have a favorite one, Brian? Outside of ONOC?
But it might be student loan. ONOC student loan is a good one. You see a lot of riders that I'm always iffy about, like catastrophic riders.
Yep.
You kind of want them in there, but at the same time, what are the chances that that your disability is going to be a catastrophic injury where you've lost a limb? It can happen, obviously. Yep. But I think from a percentage standpoint, I wouldn't tell anybody not to have it.
Yep.
But at the same time, that's of all.
Is that the most important?
Yeah, is that the most important? You really hope they don't need that one.
Yeah. So some things I'll talk about that I think makes sense because of personal experience with people that I've worked with is cost of living adjustment. So the benefit will increase if it's already being paid out. Cost of living adjustment will increase with inflation. An automatic increase rider, which automatically increases with inflation, but they also have an increased benefit rider where, especially if you're dealing with like a resident in the medical field where
income goes up,
their income's low now, just start the policy now. If the income goes up, you just submit your W-2s or pay stubs and they'll automatically increase the benefit without additional riders or additional underwriting, excuse me. They also, that doesn't just work for the medical field, but for me, I'm just going down this same theme. Then the presumptive benefit is disability, just saying you're disabled. You have family care riders that you can have. You can have rehab benefits on there. You can have riders where if you're disabled 50% of the time, it'll still pay out 50%, and different percentages based on the amount that you can work. There's also ones that happen after the fact. You go on full disability, you can come back half, then you're getting half the payout. So there's a lot of different ways to design these.
One of the things I like to do when I'm trying to design the policy for somebody is make sure they understand the elimination period.
Yep.
So the elimination period, meaning from the day you got disabled to the day that you're going to start collecting your disability check, what is that period? Whether it's 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. So my goal with the client is usually to say, okay, how much money do we have that we can set aside for emergencies? And if there's enough to set aside for emergencies for 90 days, then we can buy a policy that's going to have a 90-day elimination period, because the longer the elimination period, the lower the cost of the premium. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you have a client with enough money sitting around for 120 days, and you go, okay, well, you have 120 days of emergency fund, so let's buy a 120-day elimination period, because that's going to the cost of premiums will be lower, versus somebody that has a 30-day elimination period. So the shorter the elimination, the more expensive it is. So I'm always focusing on, like, let's have this isn't just about buying an insurance plan. It's about having a plan of what happens if as part of your financial plan.
So to that point too, then let's just really quickly touch on short-term disability. So a lot of companies already have short-term disability in their benefits. Typically that'll pay out for 6 months. So if somebody's on short-term disability and they have a 6-month payout, then for the long-term disability that we're talking about right now, 180-day elimination period is the right fit, because they're getting another benefit. We try to make sure that people have enough emergency savings anyway, that they don't need short-term disability. I personally have never sold a short-term disability policy, or group policy, so because we're doing our best to make sure that they never have to buy that. And then the other things, I just want to say, I have a client that I love telling her story. She's actually offered to speak at some of my events with me, but I wasn't there from the beginning. She graduated from medical school. She was an anesthesiologist. She bought a policy with a cost of living adjustment, and she went on disability in her mid-30s. By the time I came around, she was past 70 years old. She lived very frugally and amassed $4 million, all from a disability policy. Um, and then the old policies, when she bought it, actually never had an end in sight. There was no age 65, age 70, age 67. The company would have had to keep paying it out for the rest of her life. They actually gave her a lump sum benefit that was very large to get rid of the policy.
Just to stop paying her.
That last part's aside from the point. The point was that she was able to live her life, not sacrifice lifestyle, and still amass wealth because she had the right policy in place.
It's life saving.
Yeah, and especially you have a family, you have somebody that's depending on you, then it makes a lot of sense to have it. The other part for business owners that we talk about is business overhead insurance for disability. So if the owner should have their own policy anyway, especially if they're the one running the company, generating a lot of the revenue. But what the business overhead insurance does is pays out a monthly payment for a year that will cover the expenses of the business. A lot of companies is up to $50,000, and you now can find a replacement. You have time to not have to worry about paying the bills right away because this policy is going to pay it out. And then you have time to make a transition into something else. Maybe it's selling the company. Maybe it's just training somebody to take over. But it's an important thing to have to make sure employees get paid, the lights stay on, that the business can still function.
Oh, I firmly believe, and comes from experience and just, to me, common sense of understanding that if you're a self-employed person and your business solely survives based on your ability to keep it alive, then not having disability coverage is like walking around like a ticking time bomb.
Yep.
Because it could change your life like that. God forbid something were to happen, and you just, make part of your financial plan and your bills paying for that policy. Because if you're self-employed, it's even a bigger deal. And if you're self-employed and you have employees, or there's 1099 people that you pay as independent contractors on a 1099, and they're depending on you, and you're depending on them, I mean, everybody should be insured.
Yeah, so that's the other part is key man policies as well. You have somebody at your company that's a high-level manager, head of sales, something along those lines, where if they couldn't work tomorrow, you're going to lose a lot of revenue. But not only that, if you have insurance on your employee, then it's no longer taking cash flow out of the business to pay their income while they're on disability. And plus, if you're buying it for them, you're doing right by their family. You're doing right by your employee if something ever does happen. But it's no strain on the business if that happens. So, I think this is a really important topic that a lot of advisors brush over, a lot of people brush over because it is an expense, but it can be the difference between, getting Social Security, disability, or actually having the life that you want to live, even when you're in a place where you can't work or somebody can't work. So
it could be the difference of you dealing with what you have to deal with from the disability or the ailment that you have without worrying about your finances, or being somebody that has a GoFundMe page.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah. So, at any rate, I think you should at least review what you have, protect your biggest asset. If that is your biggest asset, maybe you're worth $1 billion and you're watching this podcast and this is irrelevant, but then I'd say you need to find a better podcast for your asset level. So.
You must be really bored if you listen to disability.
Yeah. But anyway, well, we appreciate you tuning in.
And that's all we got for now. We hope it helps. Have a great day.